And now to help me introduce the first one that he made, Le Confessionnal, please welcome Robert Lepage. This film came out in 95. Is it possible for you to sort of think back on how it felt like to jump into filmmaking after, at that point, being extremely established in theater?
Well, it was very strange. I was kind of forced into it more than anything else. Not that I wasn't interested to do film before, but it was in the early 90s. It was in the days where my work started to be seen a lot in England and mainly in London. And there were a lot of film people in London who, like a lot of film people in London, who also go and see theater, which is not the case often in North America, where these two disciplines don't seem to mix very well. But of course, in London, the film people were very aware of what I was accomplishing in theater. And the wife of a big film mogul named David Putnam, who at that time had just come back from Hollywood. He was the Columbia Pictures associate director or something. I don't remember exactly what he was doing there, but he was like a big mogul. And his wife was a great fan of mine. And she said, "Well, you have to help him do his first movie." But of course, I didn't have any intention to do any movie. So it was just kind of, and I knew that back home everybody was struggling to get subsidies to do their first movie or their second movie or whatever. So it was a bit a strange situation. And at the same time, I met with Denise Robert, that I think everybody knows now, who is now the wife of Denis Arcand and his producer. But at the time, she was still a struggling young producer, and she had been working a lot with Lepage and had produced a couple of films by younger film directors in Quebec. And she also wanted to, at that time, she was the wife of the Quebec delegate in London. So it's a London thing. It's very strange that it all started there. And we got together and they said, well, why don't we try to pull the money together to do this first feature? People had confidence that I would be able to do it, but they felt they had to have some safeguards around. And so once in a while on the set, we would have people like Denis Arcand and the accomplished directors of the time to come and see how things were going and all that. So.
And I assume that trying to define or even at the beginning tackle the film language is a total other story than, as we've said, doing your theater work for years and being comfortable there and being able to experiment on stage. Now it's a very different thing to try to tell a story that you will not be able to, test a bunch of times with your actors the day after the premiere and keep going and that such. How did you sort of end up defining that film language for you?
Well, it was very tricky because I was, in the theater, I'm used to having things happen between the moment somebody walks on stage, opens a door, closes the door, walks into the set, sits down, and they start the scene. Of course, in cinema, you cut to the table, and then people say, well, why don't we go play bingo? You cut to the bingo game. But in theater, the whole ritual and the process from going from one place to another becomes an event, and it tells a story in itself and all that. So that for me was the biggest obstacle, the biggest thing to learn about in film storytelling, that everything went so fast, and all this extraordinary material we had shot was of no use, because you want to go to the point all the time. That was a big shock for me, how fast things are and how I had to readjust all the time the storytelling, because I was so used to kind of take my time to tell the story. My work got famous because of a 6-hour-long show. So, to suddenly have people around you say, well, it has to be something around 100 minutes. And I go, oh my God, that's a bit short to tell a story. So I don't know. So there was a lot of adaptation, and also not only that, also the relationship with the actors and how you. In theater, it's all about being seen and being heard, and how in film I'm sorry?
We can get the mics louder.
I'm sorry, I don't have any control on that. I could try to speak louder in the microphone if you want me to. But so it's in the relationship. The relationship with the actors also was kind of strange, because in the theater you're obsessed with being heard, and which is the case right now, or being seen. But in film, it's a completely different alchemy, and it's about tone it down, or you don't need to say that or something. So it was a bit of a shock, I have to say, but people were very generous with me, and I had a lot of time to edit it. of course, it was in the days of the last few films in Canada that were edited on an analog editing table. The year that followed, everybody went digital, and suddenly things were so fast. So there was less time. But there was less time. Things went faster, but there was less time to think, to reflect, to take the time to say, okay, it's going to take you half an hour to do this cut. So why don't we think about it before? Why don't we think about it twice before we do it? Which, of course, all of that thinking and that thought process has disappeared with digital processing, I think. But yeah, so the thing is that it was a bit of a kind of an icebreaker for me to do this film, but it was great fun. And as I say, people were very, very generous, and there was some odd things that happened in the shooting, and you know, dealing with people like Christine Scott Thomas that you'll see tonight, who at the time was completely unknown to an American or North American audience, and she was a struggling actress who lived in Paris. She was a British actress, but couldn't make it there, so she moved to Paris, and then she seemed to have some kind of career there. And by the time we finished shooting the Confessionnal, she four weddings and a funeral came out, and then she became this huge star. And then we have to do the post-production. It was impossible to get her in because now she became just a big star. We would have afforded Christine Scott Thomas a month before, you know, which was kind of odd. And then when the film came out in Cannes, she happened to be in 3 more movies there. That's the way, because we could never afford having her or paying for the hotels or whatever. She just kind of skyrocketed. So it was a bit, and the same thing happened when I did Possible Worlds with Tilda Swinton, who nobody had really heard about. And then suddenly the film comes out. She's this huge star. So I don't know. So if you want to become a huge star in Hollywood, accept a role in one of my petty little films, and you get a chance to be nominated for an Oscar or something.
And you know, tomorrow night we'll be presenting your latest film, Triptych. In the span of these years that have gone by, would you say that you're a radically different director on screen than you were?
Oh, absolutely. And there's huge gaps between the films, because I'm not really a filmmaker. It's horrible to invite people to come see your films. I'm not really a filmmaker, but I'm more of a stage person, you know, and I'm trying to become a better filmmaker. But that's not really my first. It's my first language. Well, my first profession, let's say. But I enjoy doing it a lot, and I learn. It's a learning process each time, and I enjoy it. And I think, of course, a lot of time went by. 20 years went by since I did this, and so of course I've learned to, I guess, to be a better storyteller in film. But for me, film is more of an extension from my stage work than anything else.
So it's a compliment. Basically, obviously, you keep coming back to it. So even if I've heard even you say film is like a hobby for me, which I would think like literally 100% of people that are not you would say, no, he's a master on screen. Like that's an odd thing for us to hear.
But I'm not acting coy or anything. When I say that, it is a hobby, and in the case of the Confessionnal, I was alone in the sense that even though I was well surrounded and there was people who were generous with me, but I mean, I was playing the role of the director, and you're the one who actually get all the flack if it doesn't work or whatever, and you get blamed for everything. But as I started to grow as a film director, I started to co-direct, and of course, Triptych, the very last effort, was a co-direction, co-direction, and I prefer working that way because. I'm more of a kind of a collective process guy. You know, I like to work with a lot of people and write with a lot of people, and I don't like being the front guy, even though I always end up being the one defending the thing. But I like working. I'm more of a Boy Scout, and I like doing stuff in groups and not everything, but some things. And certainly art and telling stories for me is a collective process. So I'm trying to slowly, as I do films, and I rarely do films, but when I do them, I try to kind of change it into more of a collective process.
And I have one question before we go to the screening, which is something very much of the story itself. For those who have seen it, and for those who haven't seen it, that's fine, I'm not giving anything away, but it's interesting to me that for the first feature you directed, you completely incorporated another filmmaker, Alfred Hitchcock, and a very famous film, I Confess, which was, of course, shot in Quebec City. I always wondered, is that a film that captivated you literally your whole life, and you always thought, I'm going to use this somehow?
Well, yeah, I think the film captivated me, even though it's not considered as one of Hitchcock's great masterpieces, of course not. But it certainly had a big impact on my life, or on my culture, I'd say, because in Quebec City it was a big thing. The Hitchcock coming to Quebec City in the 50s and shooting in churches, and this whole thing completely turned the city around, and everybody from a certain generation was an extra in that movie, or I don't know, played a small part, and even top Montreal actors had a one-line part or something like that, and made their career or something. But the thing that intrigued me the most is the fact that I was baptized in the church where Hitchcock shot the I Confess. So of course, you kind of my mother kind of built this whole kind of thing. That's the reason why I got interested in art and storytelling or whatever, because I was baptized. But what was interesting about this is that in that church, the church where we shot it, actually, they didn't have a proper floor. It was linoleum or something. I don't know how you say that in English. Linoleum. Anyways, it wasn't a very nice period floor, and we decided to offer the church to rebuild their floor. We had the budget to do it, so. And of course, they say, "Oh, great! So now film will have provided the church with important elements." So we built the floor, and Hitchcock painted the ceiling. And actually, you looked at the ceiling for a small church; it had the most amazing religious iconography. It's just the most incredible ceiling. And actually, it's Alfred Hitchcock, who was Catholic, who after shooting I Confess. It was his gift to the parish, and he said, "Thank you for putting up with all this Hollywood crew and all that." And he sent some Hollywood painters who are Italian specialists, Italian backdrop painters, who were sent to Quebec City to do this amazing fresco. And nobody in Quebec City knows about this. It was only the abbé who was still alive who told us about this. So in Quebec City, there's a small church. Where there's a film paid by a floor paid by film people, and a ceiling painted by amazing Italian backdrop artists from Hollywood, paid by Hitchcock's own money. So.
And a church in which Robert Lepage was baptized.
Well, yeah. On top of that, I mean,
the biggest attraction of
get married there right away.
Thank you so much for being here tonight.
It's a great pleasure.
Robert will join us in the next 3 days. We hope to see you again. Enjoy the screening. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.